Hey, let's get to it then, shall we? Around New Year's Day, Labour rejected calls from a town called Oldham for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Then, a week later, MPs voted against a Tory call to launch a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Again. This is terrible. Just think of the children. What's going on here? Well, we'll start with what went on in Parliament, and then we'll pivot to the characters involved in causing this mess. This outrage is manufactured. Due to particulars in Parliament, even if the vote went through, Labour would have no obligation to actually, do anything about it. And a national inquiry into child sexual exploitation was recently completed in 2022, led by Professor Alexis Jay, chair of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, ICSA for short there. There were 20 recommendations she gave upon completion, precisely 0 of which were implemented by the Tories. Bear that in mind. The current government pledges to fulfill them, though I guess we'll have to wait and see for their actual performance. Doing another inquiry back to back seems a little redundant, which it is, or at least according to Professor J, who led the whole thing. Bear in mind, due to more particulars of parliamentary process, this call for an inquiry would have actually killed Labour's new, and surprisingly pretty good, Children's Safety and Wellbeing Bill. And it would kill that legislation if accepted due to the fact it came so early in the parliamentary process, not even yet reaching the House of Lords. The Tories are playing football with children's rights here, as noted by Professor J, who warns against politicising child safety. Wouldn't that be nice? This was a smart but callous political move, capitalising on already heightened anti-Islam sentiment. And grooming gangs and Muslim men are used interchangeably in this story, and everyone involved knows it. So, Labour say, Oldham Council should launch a local investigation themselves to avoid such complications, which is pretty reasonable with proper context. Okay, so that's the technical stuff out the way, and I am an apolitical channel, but this is a matter of misinformation, disinformation, and protecting child rights. So, how did we get here? It's a pretty short but emblematic story where we can all collectively be surprised that Nigel Farage isn't even in the top 3 worst characters involved. We're in for a wild ride this year, folks. Let's take it from the top. Chapter 1. The Weasel. Nigel Farage, leader of far-right party Reform UK, loves Elon Musk. He loves Elon Musk's money. Musk, like a few other billionaires, have been floating around the idea of donating millions of pounds to Reform UK for reasons known to only everybody. Farage is a D1 apartheid Clyde Glazer, calling him a hero for the youth, which is as laughable as it is disturbing. Other comments from Big Nige include saying X is a place for proper open debate. Some jokes write themselves, I suppose. And other things like, well done Elon, which is fairly hard to imagine the appropriate context for, but I digress. Recently though, Musk has decided he doesn't want glizzy gladiator Nigel at the helm of Reform UK, despite both partying with Trump December last year and mulling over finances with this British icon of a man. So what gives? Well, while Musk called for Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka former Islamophobic English Defence League leader Tommy Robinson, to be freed from imprisonment as a result of him being held in contempt of court, Farage somewhat mildly pushed back, saying, quote, he wasn't right for reform. He then said about Musk, and I quote, he sees Robinson as one of those who fought against the grooming gangs, but of course the truth is Tommy Robinson's in prison not for that, but for contempt of court, end quote, and more on that later. Those two comments must have been in the same day, as I'm reminded of that old fact about broken clocks there, though Farage would later return to Olympic meat riding in Musk's defence, despite the billionaire's comments saying things like the Home Office Minister Jess Phillips deserves to be in prison for some reason, as a response to Liz Truss. Yes, the nemesis of Lettuce Trust, saying Phillips, quote, excused masked Islamist thugs, end quote, and, second quote, it's clear whose side she's on, end quote. In a response to a tweet from GB News reporting the whole inquiry rejection, whatever, like, I mean, all those names in the same sentence is not ideal. Do note that Truss's comments aren't divisive at all, and she is definitely not an embarrassment in modern British history. I swear, the public failure to alt-right pipeline never fails. And that's the Farage character arc done, or so I thought. GB News on Jan 12th posted a video of him spouting off his usual anti-immigration rhetoric, citing grooming gangs, supposed racism against white people, and other things that aren't quite ideal for de-escalating tensions. But weasel that he is, he still managed to clear the exceptionally low bar of being less problematic than Tommy Robinson, in this story anyway. Speaking of, Chapter 2, The Martyr. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson, is the co-founder of the English Defence League, a far-right Islamophobic hate group. He is in prison for publicly displaying a short film about his defense in a libel case filed by a Syrian then-teenager after a court told him to get lost with the theatrics. Being held in contempt of court is one of his many crimes, including stalking, repeated assault, and, ironically, entering a country illegally. The states there. The libel case was filed in 2021 after a Syrian boy was recorded being attacked on a playground, and Trobinson posted 2 viral clips to a Facebook audience of 1 million people saying the kid wasn't innocent and attacked, quote, young English girls, end quote, and threatened to stab and beat up other students and stuff like that. This was, of course, untrue, and given the fact the child had to be taken out of education and the family had to move home on account of receiving death threats, Stephen had to pay $100,000 in damages and reportedly around $500,000 in legal fees, which is good news for once. This is the guy US immigrant manchild Musk wants to free so badly he pinned a free Tommy Robinson tweet to his X account. That will be the only time I call it X for the remainder of this video. You know, protect the children. Wait, not those children, I suppose. All the children raped, murdered, and abused by at least 20 EDL members since its inception, 10 of whom were active under Lennon's leadership. And to this day, he has never once condemned their actions. Repulsive. Chapter 3, The Opportunist. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, the Bottle of Water edition Candace Owens, responsible for this, drumroll please, brands herself as anti-woke. How original. I will give this woman a singular piece of praise in what seems to be her stopped clock moment, if you will, and say she did resign from government in 2022 as protest against Boris Johnson's generationally shite leadership. And now for the bad stuff. She took advantage of the optics and misinformation spread after Labour ejected Oldham's call for another government inquiry into grooming gangs to pull this symbolic virtue signalling stunt. Not just calling the vote on the amendment to the Child Safety Bill, but also stating that the government risked fueling accusations of, quote, a cover-up, end quote, words which have perpetuated yet another unfounded conspiracy theory, and we're left with a nice 2-for-1 bullshit sandwich. Enjoy. You know, it makes you wonder, what or who could be the root cause of such blatant lunacy? It seems unusually chaotic, especially when we're all in a good mood and hoping 2025 can be better than the nightmarish storm that was 2024. Chapter 4, The Meddler. We finally arrive at the final boss of this story. Billionaire manchild, pseudo-intellectual, and mighty archcunt of the internet, Elon Reeve Musk. The imminent First Lady cannot help himself from discrediting anything remotely socially beneficial or left-leaning, leveraging his ownership of Twitter and insane amounts of money to routinely perpetuate falsehoods and cozy up to people in power. He has turned the platform into an alt-right cesspool instead of a regular cesspool, and his relevant crimes against humanity will be listed here. His buying Twitter in 2022 and actions thereafter have, as far as I'm concerned, infringed upon the human right to safety, as he is creating a hate-filled swamp. Stochastic terrorism is on the rise, which is spontaneous tragedies spewing from the quantum field of hatred brewed by actors such as him and others. The director of the MI5 said in 2024 that far-right terrorism has spiked to a quarter of all terror threats. But he won't stop, because hate sells and he likes money and the power that owning Twitter gets him to brainwash people. You know, it's funny, he might actually be the best example of a terrible immigrant in recent memory, seeing as through rampant layoffs at Twitter, he actually did the whole "immigrants are taking our jobs" shtick. So that's him. Let's get to what he did this time. Musk criticized Starmer again for his apparent failure as head of the Crown Prosecution Service back around the late 2000s and early 2010s to prosecute rape gangs and lower the red tape required for prosecution. Starmer admitted that the CPS had let children down. However, he was also the first to bring down an Asian grooming gang in the nation's history, and he reopened cases and made it easier to reach prosecution. It sounds like he tried and failed, but the real issue here is when Musk retweeted a post saying rapists weren't prosecuted because the government apparently said in a memo that the victims had made a, quote, informed choice, end quote. This fabricated piece of imagination clearly feeds into the narrative that the left think paedophilia should be accepted as a sexual orientation, which precisely no one thinks. Since some jackasses are dumb enough to actually believe the government would really say this, one Google search worth of research reveals that the source of this claim, one Nazir Afal, admitted to making it up. Let's move on then. Musk also endorses Tommy Robinson, as mentioned earlier, who Farage correctly says he is holding as a martyr and soldier in the fight against grooming gangs. Which, I mean, can we just say Muslims? Can we just say it, please? Anyway, this guy pushing and prodding and sticking his filthy, fallacious fingers into every facet of hate-filled political poison he can. I cannot truly stand this embarrassment of a man. Bars. Anyway, sorry. On 8th Jan, he called Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer evil, and that's a quote, in response to a tweet about the vote. And at this point, even if he says more between writing this script and the release of this video, I will likely ignore it because we'd be here all day. Edit. I can't ignore this one. It was recently revealed he's been meeting with anti-Labour allies and is plotting to oust Starmer. Okay, man, I'm tired. Conclusion time. Why tell this tale? Yes, it's recent, but there is more important news in the world, right? I think it perfectly encapsulates the current state of misinformation and brainwashing online, from raging hypocrisy such as Lenin claiming to be for the protection of children, or Musk claiming Starmer is evil while he lays in bed with a presidential sex offender, to blatant pandering as seen with Kemi Badenoch playing off the prejudices of the people. And then there's just outright lying, with that government memo lifestyle choice thing. And then there's the reality that none of these people genuinely care, because you know who really stood to lose here? The children. That's right. The actions of all these people created an environment in which children would have been measurably worse off than if they had all just shut up and gone somewhere else. The child safety bill Labour is pushing is unusually good, and it was introduced the same day that father and stepmother Irfan Sharif and Benash Batul, respectively, were sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering Sharif's 10-year-old daughter Sarah, December 17th, 2024. She had returned to homeschooling shortly prior, and homeschooling is on the rise, up by 20% recently. Important protections and benefits were being introduced or are being introduced with this bill, including giving children a unique number, think national insurance, mandating a registry of children not at school, enhanced regulation of care providers, and a few other bonus points like giving local authorities power to make new schools and ensuring academies hire and pay teachers appropriately. No child left behind. Alright, let's proceed to the final ranking of the worst characters involved in this story. Coming in at number 1, we have Elon Musk, shock. Number 2, Stephen Yaxley, Lennon, Robinson, there you go. Number 3, Kemi Badenoch. Number 4, Nigel Farage. And number 5, Liz Truss. It is astounding that Nigel Farage is not even in the top 3 worst people in this story. He wasn't super bad this time, just regular bad. What a world. And that's the end of the story. What's the lesson here? Don't play football with human rights. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'm not really sure if this will be seen by many people, but yeah. Take care and peace.